Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We hope that you did enjoy lunch. And we shall now begin with the first session for the day, Environment and Opportunities 1. The panel for this session comprises of Mr. Rohit Kapoor, Captain Vinay Garg, Mr. Jayan Nadkarni, and Group Captain R.K. Bali. May we please request Mr. Rohit Kapoor to come on stage? Thank you.
Thank you, Seema. Good afternoon once again, everyone, and welcome back to the first of the 4 sessions that we plan to do today. Before I start this session, I think we've kind of in the hurry to close the last session. We missed out on something which I'd like to say. This BizAv India magazine, which has been released here today, it is actually an effort, a joint effort between BAOA and SP Guide. As most of you know, anybody who's in aviation is aware of SP Guide and the good work that they do. Mr. Jayant Baranwal has been personally very, very passionate and very supportive towards business aviation, and we are very proud and happy to partnering with them. We thank you, Jayant, for all the effort that you made to do this, and obviously we look forward that this becomes a quarterly, kind of a issue now, along with the SP Guides, with the support from the members of BAO. Right? Thank you. I'm actually here filling up for Kapil call. Kapil was to moderate this session, but Kapil had some issues the last minute. He couldn't make it. He will be there tomorrow, but today he's not here. So what we plan to do is we have some eminent speakers here. They've already been introduced to you. We have Jayant. Jayant is going to talk about the aircraft management concept. We have Captain Vinay Garg, and of course we have Group Captain Bali. The topics are known to you. What we want is we want this to be a participative kind of a discussion. I'm going to be moderating it. The speakers are going to come up. They're going to give short presentations, and we will leave in every session. We will leave at least 10 to 15 minutes for question answers and for any ideas and opinions that you have. Also, just for your information, this entire discussion that is taking place today is being, videographed. Points are being noted. We will make sure that all the prominent points which are raised in this forum today will be presented to the Ministry of Civil Aviation. So we will present it as a paper, as a feedback, so that you have all the issues that are raised up here today, all the points. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to request Captain Vinay Garg. As you know, Captain Vinay Garg also represents UAS, which is our gold sponsor today. So we'd like to thank him, and we'd like to thank UAS for the support. So Captain Vinay Garg, may I request you to come on stage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The first session after the lunch is normally a tough time to garner the attention of the audience, but it also happens to be the first session. And so it is my pleasure today to be speaking to this august gathering, who have far more experience than eminent people here. I'll be just, very briefly going through the environment, the present situation which is there on the ground. Can we have this slide? And then be able to kind of crystal gaze and see what kind of a way we can have for the future.
Yeah, you can point at that.
Okay.
Okay.
Not working.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So it's just briefly to tell what exactly we are going through, and then the environment A lot of points that I am going to cover has been already spoken in a way they have been preempted already by Mr. Rohit Kapoor, by the Joint Secretary Civil Aviation. And so what I will now put across to you is in a consolidated manner, and maybe then it can be when BAOA takes it over as a paper to present to the ministry, these points can find some mention and perhaps grab attention. Just a few pointers before we move on is that the Indian civil aviation industry is among the top 10 globally with a size of $16 billion. And the plan is that the Indian carriers will double their fleet by 2020 to around 800 aircraft. The current size of Indian MRO market is estimated to be $700 million. The total manpower requirement of airlines is to rise from 62,000 in the financial year 2011 to almost double, that is 117,000 by the year 2017. And Asia Pacific region is expected to emerge as a frontrunner, the largest aviation market in the next 15 to 20 years. Another interesting point that has emerged by the study, combined study by FICCI and KPMG group last year, is that the development of civil aviation and socio-economic development of a country go hand in hand. That is, they are highly interrelated. According to ICAO, an additional dollar invested in civil aviation leads to a benefit of around $3 to the local economy. Moreover, every additional job created in this sector results in creation of 6 more jobs. So we can well think that civil aviation just does not affect the industry as such, but it pans across different sectors of the economy. And therefore, as has been said a lot of time earlier on, that we have a huge potential, there is a lot that can be done, and all we need is to put our act together with different industry bodies, with the government supporting them and giving them the required morale booster. Now coming to potential, I was at a seminar a short days ago where the Minister of Home for State, Mr. Rijiju, he said that we often talk about our potential but fail to realize it. And that is true of almost every walk of our life in India. And so civil aviation is no different from that. But I think the time has come that we should take some concrete steps and make things happen. Now, as the Joint Secretary himself said, the prevailing perception in the industry is that business aircraft is a symbol of capitalism, a sign of opulence and conspicuous consumption. It goes without saying that there is a great linkage between the development of business aviation and the economy as a whole. And that today it is a very important tool in the hand of a corporate executive to optimize his time, have flexibility, and swiftly respond to changing situations. And no less than our present Prime Minister can vouch for it when it is said that during his campaign time he used to be back in the state capital of Ahmedabad almost every night for 3 months. It was just because he was able to have the services of a private jet at his disposal, and that he was able to attend to the affairs of the state and be out for campaigning and do much that smoothly. Infrastructure is a very important part, and despite significant progress in development on modern airport, the situation is still not up to the mark. I would say quite grim. There's lack of FBOs, lack of parking space for business aircraft, especially at metros. And as was brought out by another speaker, that most of our MRO work is outsourced to other countries. Only 5 to 10% of MRO work is done within our own country. And it's a classic case of scoring a self-goal. Then the regulatory mechanisms themselves take a lot of time. Just for an example, an aircraft that has to be imported into India and registered for regular operations can take almost up to 1 year, whereas the same thing can be done for less than 30 days in Singapore. So that in itself tells us what kind of a huge gap exists as of now, and once we can take positive steps towards bridging this gap, I'm sure it will give a lot of spur to the people who are thinking of inducting aircraft, and also to the industry as a whole. Another point that could perhaps catch attention of the Joint Secretary here is that we still have to file hard copies of landing permissions at the DGCA, whereas today in India a company can be registered online and you can get most of your clearances and all the the required PAN, TAN, etc. online, whereas here we have to still go to the DGCA and fill in hard copies. Part of it has been done, that there is a system of computerization, but there is a lot more that can be done on that front. The operations part, again, like somebody said, that scheduled carriers get priority. Business aviation is considered a low priority sector, and that is why all the rules and regulations are framed as per the requirements of the scheduled carriers. Just for an example, you can see on the slide there are this restricted hours of operation at Bombay, and so you can see there is hardly any window for the business aircraft to fly, and that is when to say that most of the aircraft, business aircraft, are based out of Bombay. Now we have to do something about it, either change the schedule when they can fly, or then have alternative base with which is dedicated to general aviation only. Similarly, the GA lounge at Delhi, it cannot still cater for the international arrivals and departure, and the people have to still do that at T3. Only domestic flights can operate out of the GA lounge. I am sure the mechanism can be set in place to set this right. The clearance at military bases again takes a long time, and I think that becomes a deterrent for the people to use a business aircraft when they are flying flying to any of the military bases. Now, my suggestion is that if we are able to capture data, if the same aircraft with the same passenger is coming to the same base after a duration of say 3 months, that time there should be the clearance should be very expeditious, because you have already got all the details that are required for security clearance. All it requires is that we need to have a mechanism for data capturing, and then be able to put it to use to be able to expedite the clearance. Taxation is a well-known fact, and it is very important for the powers that be to acknowledge the devastating impact of high taxes. Some of the avoidable taxes can be the state taxes on ATF, MRO, service tax on air tickets, high airport charges like passenger fees and UDF, etc. Now, having said that, it would be fair to acknowledge that things have started showing signs of improvement in the recent past, and a proactive approach is being sought, as has been acknowledged by quite a few people here. And towards that end, I would like to put in a few points. When we mourn for the lack of infrastructure, we already have some existing infrastructure with us, and that is to say that HAL Airport right in Bangalore is one ideal base which can handle business aircraft operations. But as of now, again, it is being used only for domestic operations, and international operations again go out of the international airport only. Now, if we do not utilize this infrastructure, they are bound to languish, and then they will be put to disuse. So it is again for the government to look into the things, how they can be set right. Maybe sometimes there are different lobbies which do not want to work that way, but if we make a concerted effort, I am sure it would be a game changer for everybody around. Similarly is the thing at Begum Airport. The old Hyderabad airport can be also used for business aviation, and being right in the center of the city, it will again give a boost to the operations there. The FBO at Delhi has been in works for a long time, at least for the last 5 years that I have been seeing that we are looking at setting up the FBO at Delhi, but it has not seen the light of the day as yet. There is a huge amount of space and infrastructure already available at the old airport, that is to say T1 and T2. And if we get that modified into FBO, the operations at Delhi are going to be far more smoother. There is also this unutilized space at the Safdarjung airport. It could be used for some maybe helicopter operations. I know there are security issues involved with that, but I am sure if we do not utilize that space, there are already talk of setting up a market there or something, or a parking lot. But I am sure aviation can use it to some better purpose. Regarding the regulatory framework, taxation and policies, there have been a reduction in sales tax on ATF, and here I would like to mention West Bengal, which is the first large state in the country to declare 0% sales tax on ATF at its regional airports. More could be achieved by relaxation in regulations. The proposed Essential Services Fund by the Ministry of Civil Aviation needs to be taken up immediately, and I am sure with this kind of central fund available, a lot of the issues can be tackled centrally. All this will tend to have a multiplier effect on the higher growth for tourism, employment, and the local economic activity. The regulatory framework has also started moving on. Visa for arrival is now available for 44 countries. Notice for international operations has been reduced from 7 to 3 working days. But like I said, military bases, we can look at it and see that we can reduce the notice period for that also. A lot more needs to be done, and most of us here would be aware that consultations are in progress to explore ways to make Civil Aviation Authority more effective. And that is the requirement of times and the atmosphere in the country as today. It is not for the fear of FAA downgrade that we should get our act together, but also that it will help us and give a boost to our economy. There could be a strong case for having a separate wing in the Civil Aviation Authority which deals with the affairs of general aviation. So gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to say that there are numerous areas where positive intent and action can lead to unlocking the potential, but will not be possible to mention here. There are a lot of other issues, but and the few that I have spoken, and all put together can give us the required direction to move positively ahead. It would suffice to say that India has got a great strategic location an upwardly mobile middle class, and a favorite business and investment destination. A variety of tourism locations. All these need the sector of civil aviation to contribute to each of these, and together it can have a multiplier effect on our economy. The review of existing policies and removal of roadblocks, or in the aviation parlance, the removal of air pockets in growth of this important sector, can prove to be a game changer. If we fail to seize the opportunity now, business aviation will be consigned to remain a fancy mode of transportation for the corporate world, or at best a status symbol. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Gar, for a talk which is, I think, most of the issues that you brought out, people are well aware. I would just request the speakers to remain within about 7 to 8 minutes of your presentation. I want to have more time for discussions and question answers. Just one or two points from your presentation. I'd just like to say we keep hearing everywhere that India is going to be the third largest aviation in the world by 2020. I can tell you, it's going to take a lot to reach there. I've been hearing this for the last 3 years, and 2020 is not too far away. so we got to work very hard to be there. So that's one. I think we'll take it with a little bit of, inverted. The perception is, of course, an issue. For the perception, I would only like to say that, it's been years, even in the US, the perception still remains. I keep reading on and off about taxes coming up on business aviation. Recently, I think President Obama has put on some taxes, which I'm sure Pete will be able to, or Kurt will be able to tell us. So this perception it's an ongoing battle. It's not going to change overnight, and we have to continue to fight this one. Some of the other points are well known. Why we can't use Begumpet, why we can't use HAL. I think, sir, there are very simple solutions to this. What we really need is, we need one body which gets all the people involved, under the Ministry of Civil Aviation, whether it's people who run HAL Airport or run Begumpet Airport. I think the solutions are not very difficult. What is happening is that there are too many multiple bodies. It's difficult to get their attention together. So if we could get people together and work on solutions, I'm sure we'll be able to do that. I'm going to invite Jayant Nadkarni to talk about aircraft management. Thank you. We'll take the question answers after all the speakers are done.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm speaking to you on aircraft management today. In the previous session, you heard that we're on a cusp of change. But that's really true. There are a lot of opportunities coming up ahead of us. And one of those opportunities is aircraft management. How it's going to help us? Let's see. So this is how I will cover my talk. A little bit about the concepts, what are the benefits, how do you choose a management company which is good for you and right for you? How is all this related to the health of the industry? What's the pattern of growth? And what are the issues affecting growth? First off, essentially, this just means that the owner is separate and the management company or the operator is separate. They're two separate entities. So far, as you all know, that in India, the owner and the operator have been pretty much one. 120 odd NSOP companies in India, at least 110 of them are owners and operators themselves. So the concept is very nascent in India. The vast majority are operators themselves. Contrast this to the globe. Hundreds and hundreds of management companies exist globally. On the NBAAA website, if you click on management service provider members, there are over 750 amongst in the US alone. Large fleets, huge economies of scale, lots of benefits. And mostly, they are separate arms of charter operators offering an additional service to manage an outsider's aircraft as part of their fleet. So let's talk on the benefits. First off, you have a new customer buying a new aircraft, bringing it into India, and he decides to go with the management company. an existing AOC holder, he gets ready-made industry connections, a ready-made flight department cell, safety cell already set up, SMS running, and as most of you already know, these are not switch-off, switch-on buttons that you can just throw money and buy it. It takes time, years of effort to get it honed up and running well. There's a session on SMS by Commander Ganpati coming up next, and I'm sure you'll realize from that as well. Better planning gives huge cost savings. So if there's an AOC holder or a management company which has been in the business for 4, 5, 8, 10 years, imagine that they're going to be able to get your aircraft, which you induct into the country, off the block much faster. No more sitting on the ground for 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, maybe even a year. Far more efficient operations, very few mistakes, and if I may say, lesser blame games. Because in all of this, it's not healthy that there's a blame game, oh, that's DGCA's fault, the changing rules, oh, that's the OEM's fault. So all that kind of will hopefully reduce. That's good for the industry. This I already mentioned, economies of scale. When you have a large fleet, you have lower insurance rates, lower maintenance, lower parts programs. You can negotiate lower parts support programs from the OEM manufacturers and so on. Big benefit. You get the possibility of additional utilization. Supposing I'm a customer and I decide to buy an aircraft for myself, I have just 100 hours of usage in a year. I can, by putting it on the AOC of a managed service provider, have an additional utilization. Your aircraft's not on the ground, lesser chances of corrosion, lesser chances of being hit with greater costs later on. And of course, there's a possibility of charter revenues should you want them. Another big advantage. When you buy an aircraft, it's not going to be available to you 24/7, 365 days a year. It's going to be down sometimes for maintenance. At that time, you could get access to another additional aircraft. In fact, your aircraft is probably going to be good for a particular mission. Supposing it's good for it's a light made for domestic routes. And if the AOC operator where you got your aircraft in, he has a big Gulfstream or a big Bombardier going long ranges, you could get access to those. Additional crew members. Imagine that you pay for your one aircraft, one set of crew, one PIC, one SIC. You could get access to additional crew members. This is all coming from the managed company. Okay, finally, if you work with a managed service provider or another AOC, it de-risks and protects the owners. It's not really very well appreciated, but owners, if your aircraft is given to another AOC holder or an operator or an NSOP, the owner is not answerable to DGCA. The operator is. And not liable for damages also. I'll explain this in the next slide. Big benefit, protection of asset value. You're not going to be holding your aircraft forever. After 5 to 10 years, you're going to want to sell it. You sell your cars also. You sell your aircraft also. So imagine that a very professional company would protect the value of your aircraft in terms of proper maintenance, proper documentation, proper daily care, and when it's sold in the global market, you will get global value. Owner confidentiality. We're in Asia, India. You would rather not the whole world know that you have a jet. There are certain benefits of that. Less obligations to people and the political class as well. Okay, so how do you choose an aircraft management company? But first off, we need to tell you a few things. Very nascent scene in India, but poised for growth. Hundreds and hundreds of them management companies exist globally, but very few in India. Not everybody are tuned totally to your requirements. Not everybody has a capability. Still very small fleets, so you don't have all those benefits of economies of scale. So how exactly do you choose one? Here's how. Well, straight away, there are two types of management companies, broadly speaking. One is a certified AOC holder or an NSOP or a charter operator. The other one is a non-AOC holder, just about anyone but with some amount of aviation expertise. As you can see out there that I've given three key differences between the two. The first one, the AOC holder comes under a regulatory purview, so he has higher standards. It's the job of the DGCA and the regulator to hold you to higher operational standards and higher safety standards. So if you're looking for higher standards, go with an AOC holder. But if you look for acceptable but a little bit more flexibility in operations, you need not go with an AOC holder. End-use flexible. With an AOC holder as your management provider, you have a possibility of charter revenue. Not so with an with a non-AOC holder where it's only private flights. Liabilities, the big one. okay, if your aircraft has a problem and you have third-party damages, the party having operational control of the aircraft is liable for damages and suits, not anybody else. So clearly, if you're in the first category working with an AOC holder as a management company, the owner is safe. Not so if you're a pure private operator giving your aircraft to a management provider who's a non-AOC holder. In other words, not putting it into the NSOP of another company and working in a private category only. Basic metrics, these are basic things everybody asks. How long in business, how long, any conflicts, any accidents, fleet size, industry opinion, what is it? These are the basic things. But how tuned are they to you? This is something everybody would like to ask. Is there a structured program existing for managing your aircraft as a service? This is kind of missing in India, where it's far more professional abroad, but I think it's coming into India now. Check if there's how much transparency is there. Check the fee levels, and check the different splits that you can work on. Now let's dig a little bit deeper. This is like getting under the hood, actually. Can you check the bandwidth and manpower of that NSOP or that management service provider to manage additional aircraft? Can you gauge if it's a process-driven company or a personality-driven company? Let's face it, folks. Every NSOP company started as a personality-driven company. There were one or two main drivers or the promoters who were running the show. Have they made the transition from being a personality-driven company to a process-driven company where there are proper organization, departments, proper SOPs, many leaders of different departments, and everything is working smoothly even if the main personality, main promoters are not there? That's an important thing you could gauge. And it has a big impact on scalability. Scalability is kind of very important because the better the scalability in an NSOP or in any managed service provider, the better is that company's ability to induct your aircraft and run it well, and every subsequent aircraft that it inducts. So that's something you would want to know. But it's not easy to get to know. So how do you get to know? It's kind of linked with point number 5. This is all going below the hood a little too much, but it's very useful if you can get this information. Can you gauge the organization culture or the safety culture? They're both very linked together, interlinked together. It's not easy. It's only possible if you meet the people, talk to them, maybe ask for an organization chart, chat up with them, just ask them how they are. How do the people talk to each other? Try and gauge it. Are they happy? Is SMS implemented? To what stage? These are very interesting things which you will also hear from in the next session on SMS and ISBAU. This is something you can straight away ask. So any independent safety accreditations like ISBAU, Y1, ARGUS, this straight away tells you, slap up, what's the capability of the aircraft management provider. What's the relationship to the health of the industry? Pretty direct. Today we are a very small industry, fragmented, small fleets. So most of those benefits of economies of scale that I was mentioning are not there. High cost structure, becoming costlier, lack of pilots, high leverage, high salaries, and revenues. The charter pricing levels are quite low, razor thin margins, effectively each flight subsidized by owners. The market is controlled by mostly brokers with excellent reach across the country, but pretty much playing one operator against the other and depressing charter pricing. Charter pricing is not going up anywhere, so the only way you can probably benefit is by getting costs down, and they can come down with a good aircraft management company. Patterns of growth. For sure, more and more companies are going to be developing aircraft management arms as an additional service. There's no escape from that, and they would do that. One can probably project that some of the bigger NSOPs that are de facto flight department extensions of large corporates might not be interested in doing so because their primary job is to support their industrial group, be it mining, they're so diversified and huge. Their secondary job is charters. They probably would not go into another service of managing another third party's aircraft. No, that's probably not going to happen. Instead, who are the people who are going to be interested in getting into this space? Are NSOPs who are non-aligned to specific corporate groups, who genuinely want to grow their fleets. And in fact, given the depressed charter market pricing, this is the only way they can grow their fleets. 3 ways how growth can be affected. The first is to all our friends in Embraer, Bombardier, Gulfstream. Please keep the health of the industry in mind during your sales efforts. Advise your customers on the day-to-day realities of your own operations, on small standalone operations. Not easy. Your aircraft can be sitting on the ground for months and months on end, giving you a bad name, giving DGC a bad name, giving everybody, the industry, a bad name. Partner and suggest capable management companies, some capable NSOPs for hand-holding these customers and just inducting and managing their fleets very well. It's good for the industry, it's good for you. A happy customer is a repeat customer. How can DGCA help? Well, all we want is encouragement to grow our fleets. And as and when this concept takes off and all the Haldiram, Bikaner, construction companies, mining companies, whose the core area is not aviation, just buy the aircraft and give it out to professional NSOPs to run. You'll find our fleets growing up, you'll find slowing down of the mushrooming of new NSOPs all over. It'll make DGCA's safety oversight much easier. How can the government help? Please reduce the duty differential between private and the NSOP category operators. I needn't go further into it, but it's got a big, big impact on aircraft management. I'd like to thank you, but I think I missed out a slide on the benefits. Okay, I did run through it. Well, thank you, everyone. If there are any questions, I'll take it on later on. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Jayant. That was a very interesting talk. Now, just tell me, I have a question for you before we move on to the next speaker. Does DGCA recognize aircraft management?
No regulatory authority needs to recognize aircraft management companies. Regulators only recognize and are concerned with operators, not aircraft management.
No, this one.
Okay, your question was, does DGCA recognize aircraft management companies? And the answer is no, they don't need to. Regulators are only concerned with certified AOC holders or operators, not aircraft management companies.
Can I make a point here? There's a point here.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead, sir. Okay, I think it's, you can outsource, but you cannot outsource your operation. So if you say that there is no requirement of DGCA, no, there is a requirement. The DGCA rules had to be changed to allow the AOC operators to outsource their operations and safety.
I tend to agree with Captain Jolly. The point I'm trying to make is, it's been years and years when we go to DGCA and we talk about aircraft management, we always get shot down more by the FID than by anybody else. There is this concept which says, how can the owner and the operator be different? How can the owner get away if something goes wrong? What is his liability? And we've been trying to tell them there's a very simple answer. The owner is liable for ownership issues. The operator is liable for operational issues. There is no rocket science here. If there are any problems on the ownership pattern of the aircraft, the owner is accountable. If there are any issues on the operational issues, the operator is responsible, and that's how it's done worldwide. But however, the DGCA does seem to have an issue with it. The benefits are actually it's on the slide. Everybody has seen the benefits. 120 NSOPs could have been probably just 35 NSOPs. It would have saved us a lot of grief of, the lack of inspectors, FA downgrade. If these things were thought about, I think it's still not too late. One point, again, Jayant, which you touched very briefly, is on the differential import duty structure. I think somewhere down the line, that is playing its part. Before 2007, the DGCA wasn't so concerned about allowing operator and owner to be different. They were, it was happening, though not officially blessed, but it was happening. But after 2007, once the differential import duty structure came in, the view was that, okay, who's going to pay the duty? Is it going to be an NSOP? Why should he pay a reduced duty when the owner is in the private category? So all that confusion is taking place. We'll come back to question and answer. Captain Walsey will come back to you at the end of the session. I know you have a question.
No, I don't have a question.
Can I move to the next speaker and we come back? We'll open it up in the end. I'll now request Group Captain Bali to talk about regional connectivity.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Rohit. In fact, for giving me a topic which is very close to my heart. My association with this topic started on 25th August last year, when the discussion paper was put on the ministry's website regarding remote and regional connectivity policy to be framed by Government of India. Since then, I have attended almost all the sessions held in the ministry or any conferences on regional remote connectivity. And what I am going to give you today is a little different perception, which is based on the views expressed in various forums and various conferences. So I start. I start with a little background to what is remote and regional connectivity, how it was perceived by the ministry. You know, when the privatization of the airlines took place in beginning of 90s, what ministry found was most of the private airlines were trying to fly only between the metros. There was no attention given to the other areas. So they came out with the route dispersal guidelines known as RDGs in 1994. The question is, have these RDGs met their purpose? I think the straight answer is only partially and only initially. Because I think the dynamics of aviation industry is such that anything which stays a little longer becomes stale. So they are there, but they have lost a little bit of the relevance, as I will show you in the slides later on. How it affected the airlines? Well, initially it was a challenge for them to develop some of the routes, and much of that responsibility actually fell on Indian Airlines. Those who tried to undertake those routes, it resulted in multiplicity of the fleet to serve hubs and spoke in the region. Onus on the airlines to this onus actually, RDGs put the onus of providing regional and remote connectivity on the airlines, which perhaps was not very right. Infrastructural constraints were there. We still hear about those infrastructural constraints when you find that some flights to Jammu were taking place or Patna were taking place when runways are not fit for that. Unstable load factor was, these things affected the airlines. Well, as I mentioned, the RDGs were issued 2 decades back. So their relevance was not much as of today. So that is why, of course, it was late, but ministry put up a new proposal last month to review the RDGs. I have stolen 2 slides from that proposal, which was put up by our chief guest last month in the ministry. I will show you that. There is a resistance on the new proposal from the airlines, and some of those that resistance is also misplaced. Of course, these are the individual interests which are playing their role. The new entrants are not in favor of, removing 520 rules. The older ones are, but that's a different topic altogether. But there are other reasons for their complaint, which I'll come to. BOA, as always, has welcomed this proposal, but we have given suggestions to do this thing in a right way. And this is the slide which I've stolen from what was presented to us the ministry. As you see, earlier there were category 1 at 12 routes. They proposed to increase it to 26 routes. Earlier they were basically between metros, and the additional destination was Trivandrum. But in the new proposal, they have chosen those routes where the traffic in 2013 was above 5 lakh. So they're supposed to have 26 Cat 1 routes, and these are the ASKM's available seat kilometers. The figures are 2013 and in the new category also. Now the earlier category 2 routes, which were the routes connecting stations in Northeast, Jammu, Kashmir, Andaman, Nicobar and Lakshadweep. That is why I feel that those RDGs were a little hurriedly made. They did not take into account the requirement of Himachal Pradesh and Uttaranchal. These are also inaccessible areas, and they should have been paid attention, but that has been corrected this time. And they want to include Dehradun, Shimla, Kullu and the other destinations in Himachal and Uttaranchal. Earlier, and now there are Cat 2A routes, which are basically between these destinations in these areas, which was supposed to be 1% of Cat 1. And then the Cat 3 routes, which were earlier mandated to be 50% of Cat 1, they are not being mandated this time, because as per the present data available, they already cross 100% of the requirement. I will tell you what is the salient feature of new proposal put up by MOCA. They have, as our chief guest mentioned in the morning, they have created a new scheduled commuter airlines, SCA. So it is a airlines, and we presume that it will have all the benefits of airlines on import duty also. SCA is allowed to publish schedule, which he mentioned, and you need to take 4 flights in a week to any of the destination, but this destination should not be between metros. We also presume, since we are optimistic people, we also presume that dual use of SCA is permitted, as Jayant covered earlier. If you allow dual use, someone who's in FA terms, if someone is FA Part 91 certified, if you allow dual use, Part 135, you can actually get your aircraft certified to Part 135 and bring it in, you can fly in both, 91 as well as 135. And it's a win-win situation because someone who's flying in the private is flying aircraft which is certified for high degree of safety. Code sharing, which was covered up in the morning, it is being allowed. Then the new feature is the involvement of the state governments. They have been asked to consider underwriting seats and provide tax concession, infrastructure support. We have actually recommended that there should be a liaison team with each state government to facilitate operations from the airports in their state. In our suggestions, we have also given that for all over India development of regional remote connectivity, you need to have about 10 clusters all over India, and each cluster can have 1 to 3 or 4 hubs, and these are the hubs on this slide as we are mentioning. These are the suggested clusters all over India and the hubs in each. These hubs should actually give you that hub and spoke model facility, and the MROs are required to be created there with the state government help. These are the other 6 which we are mentioning, the total 10 hubs. Now let's look at what is the way forward and how we like to look at it. All incentives which government is considering for remote and regional connectivity should be on long-term basis. It takes time to develop a route, for a route to be matured. So it should be at least 5 years, and some few things can go up to 10 years. Infrastructural status for aviation industry, which was the demand of all the stakeholders after the last meeting was held in the ministry, and we fully support that. Amendment in OMDA for GA infrastructure. We have been discussing it, but time has come for action. In fact, it should not be only restricted to amending the existing OMDA. Provision should be made to ask the existing operators of the private operator at the metros to create facilities for an infrastructure for GA. When I say the existing one, they fall into the category of government directive to be given to ERA. The ERA Act, which was actually enacted after the OMDAs was signed, clearly provides for government directive to be given in case it finds fit and reasons to be given in writing by government that this is what is required for the industry, and they can ask ERA to regulate those charges to keep them at a very reasonable level. Capital side subsidy, cheap loans from bank. It's not possible for all the operators, especially the smaller ones, to raise cheaper loans from abroad. Our own bank should provide those loans. That should be part of our national policy. Now this is an important aspect. When you throw up this challenge to a new entrant as SCA, he needs to develop, he needs to make sure the route gets matured in times to come. So he should be not subjected to unhealthy competition for at least 5 years. So he is able to, but after 5 years you review it. If there is more demand, first ask him to make more seats available. If he is unable to, then you can always go for other operators to come in. This is very important, creation of Air Connectivity Fund, and this was also demand of all the stakeholders after the last meeting with the ministry. Now, okay, we are not asking, this is nothing unique. All other countries have been doing it of this size that of India. Take the case of most developed country, USA. It established, they called it Essential Air Services Program, and it was established in 1978. And this is a budget, and it connects with 160 rural communities. Brazil has announced it very recently, and it's offering 50% subsidy. There are other provisions in that. I'm just giving you the highlights. Australia subsidizes regular weekly services. China has also started in 2014, and they have allotted USD 150 million to subsidize domestic regional aviation. Now we have talked, actually Pete Burns has given this figure for USA in the morning. I just corrected mine a little bit. This is the comparison. What is Europe at 160,000 plus jobs created with the value added of above 20 billion and with 4,000 aircraft. Look at India and you compare with China, we have a potential to grow. And we must focus on that. Well, in conclusion, I need to say one thing, that when it comes to providing regional connectivity, and this point was discussed in the ministry, it is the social responsibility of the government. When it is your social responsibility, please do not ask others to take the lead. You have to take the lead. It is not only hand-holding, it has to be firm hand-holding and leading the way. That is what government needs to do. And how it can do that is by first creating Air Connectivity Fund. It is by pragmatic regulatory approach, which we have been talking about. A lot of time has been spent in discussing this. Is a time for action now. Infrastructure to be created for general aviation. We have actually recommended each OMDA to be amended, like to create 30% of infrastructure at all the big cities for general and business aviation. And more proactive role of state government, underwriting of seat, tax concession. VAT is already being tackled on the ATF. The other thing which government can do when we're talking about fuel, there are some cost-effective solutions available. People in India are trying to bring aircraft, piston engine aircraft, but which are very cost-effective when it comes to fuel cost. But the cost is, if you compare it with the cost abroad, if in USA the cost is equivalent of 40 rupees a liter, in India it is 210. The government needs to look into it to provide necessary logistics support and ensure the IOC brings the cost of that fuel to a reasonable level. And as far as operators are concerned, I think we are all stakeholders. We should take up the challenge to develop a route. We should not look for ready-made solutions to our business. We should develop our own business and take up the challenge. And all the stakeholders should take it their responsibility that in times to come, GA ensures an enabled inclusive growth of India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Bali. That was a very enlightening talk. Firstly, I must say you're a very brave man. In front of the Joint Secretary, you were saying that you've stolen some slides from the Ministry of Civil Aviation presentation. All right, we'll let that pass. All right, so without wasting any more time, I'm going to open this up to the House for questions. And I would only request you to, whoever has a question, to take the mic, state your name, and please let us know who the question is directed to. And we'll get the panelists to answer the question. So, anybody? Captain Valsraj? Yes.
Yeah, I'm Captain Valsi from Deccan. I'm the President and Chief Pilot of the company. I'll take from what Mr. Nadkarni, he spoke. Well, as far as aircraft management is concerned in this country, and as far as the regulatory body is concerned, I was handling an aircraft management company for last about 3 years. And the only way the aircraft management can be done in this country right now is to get the aircraft in your own NSOP and carry on with that. Because with that, it means that the aircraft has to be maintained by the NSOP holder as well as operated by the NSOP holder. There is no way of outsourcing. And the model which we had handled was about a set of 4 jets with their own NSOP. Well, the DGCA doesn't just understand that. In fact, the problems are not at the conceptual level. You must understand that. Conceptually, we're all talking here. They are very good. The problem is, the ground reality is when you go down to the DGCA, even today, forget about aircraft management. There is a severe lack of understanding as far as the issues and problems for the general aviation is concerned in the DGCA. Despite the fact that the staff now who have been appointed there from general aviation, they do not realize that, in my own words, sorry, I can't be polite when I speak here, because these are real issues. You know, the problem is that they do not have this understanding that their inaction or a delayed action, the implications of the same on a general aviation, monetarily, operationally, whatever way you want to take, you can ground a company. That is where it is. Agreed. There are rules, there are regulations. You're compliant. But a company that is trying to be compliant, it is a regulatory body, not being a policeman, but to facilitate the compliance, not other way around. Now this is just basics. Now, another issue what I find is that we have not got together yet as an industry, as a general aviation industry in this country. And this organization, BAO, is the beginning, and I'm glad, Rohit, I mean, it's a wonderful thing to happen. We have no lobby. Lobby not for politicking, lobby for doing our own jobs, and lobby for getting our industry forward. We do not have that. Anybody can browbeat you and take you out, even on a real real legal matter where we are following compliances. I do not need to go into the individual cases or issues of here. Rohit Kapoor knows about it. I spoke at a forum long back on this. Things are not moved forward. Even in the last 3 years, I mean, since I've been handling, that is, we as an industry should make sure the regulatory body understands their issues so that they can do their job properly. If they do not have the understanding of your problems and your issues, you're not going to move anywhere forward. Even with the representatives at the DGCA, I'll take 2 minutes, Rohit. I know you're taking the mic there. Even with the representatives from the general aviation moving in there, I find they are finding it very difficult to change the system. The system is changing them. This is where we have to look into. I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Walsey. I think very powerful words, and I think you were fairly polite, so you can rest at peace. So, you know, the point is, what you say is known to all of us. All right, it's not something which is not known. It's we know the issues of DGCA. We know what's going on there. When you say that we don't have a lobby, I always say the irony is that out of the 77 members we have, probably 40 of them are listed in the top most 100 powerful companies in India. So, you know, and yet we do not have a lobby. So that's a little surprising, but that's the irony of the whole thing. Your points are well noted, sir. BAO at BOA, we are trying to engage with the government, with DGCA, to make them understand. I think the first thing that should happen is that everybody must understand that an aircraft needs to keep flying. It is in everybody's interest that an aircraft must fly, whether it's the DGCA or it's the operator. I think if that is understood by all, automatically things will fall into place. Thank you. Can I have somebody else with a question? I saw a hand being raised somewhere in the rear benches. No?
Use both for private as well as for commercial. You become a SCA, and we presume that airlines, I don't know, there may be some still doubts in some people in the ministry or DGCA. When you are named as airline, you are bound to get all concession which other airlines get because you are publishing your schedule. If you are doing that and doing 4 sorties, 4 flights in a week to any of the incentive destination, then you can use the aircraft for other purposes of charter and private also. So that will help you optimize the use of the aircraft and reduce your cost. Thank you. I hope I...
Hello. Yeah. So thank you, Captain Wali. I agree with you. See, The issue here, what I'm trying to bring out is that certain policies are being formulated at this time. You know, there is a new kind of an effort which is coming out. I think it's extremely important for the stakeholders to be involved at this stage to make sure that the policies come out in a way that they are actionable. Because if that doesn't happen now, I can tell you that these policies will not get reviewed for the next 10 years. All right? We will still be stuck with a policy which is almost there but not fully complete. So on the regional connectivity, I have read the policy. I still think that there are certain more issues which need to be looked at by the government, which will actually allow somebody to get up there and start doing that business. And unless we put that in place now, it's not going to happen after a few years. So that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to make one more point here. In fact, as stakeholders also, I mean, most of the time we get up and complain about things being wrong. But when it comes to giving suggestions on a discussion paper or on a draft policy brought out by government or DGCA, we are not doing our job. Let me pardon my saying so. Because in BOA, we ask the stakeholder for comments, we ask operators, we have to actually chase people to give their comments. That is the time. You must work on those suggestions, come out with the difficulties you face in the field, and the suggestions how we can improve the things. That is the time we have to play our active role. That we must do all the time.
Thank you. Well, sir, can I just take the other question, please, if you don't mind? Go ahead, sir. Can somebody give him a mic, please?
Thanks, Rohit. Coming to the issue of regional connectivity and remote connectivity, can this policy of the government be tweaked to accommodate the general aviation operators into this exercises of providing regional and remote connectivity? The reason is that general aviation in India has a force, it is growing, and to further make it grow, can we not put the general aviation operators into this program of providing the regional connectivity? To bring up a new entity called regional commuter service from the existing regional scheduled operators. There was regional scheduled operators permit also. So that will again go through a process where the general aviation operator, if he wants to become a regional commuter service, has to follow some more rules and regulations like the airlines publishing their schedules. But the market in the regional and remote areas does not or will not for the time to come the type of traffic for which a regional commuter service will also be economically viable and will be losing. So what I would suggest to BOA, and getting the cues from Group Captain's paper, that BOA should think of something where the general aviation operators in this country with their modern aircrafts can also fit into the remote regional connectivity program. You would certainly appreciate that many of the regional locations will not support the big aeroplanes or a commuter-like aeroplane. Small aeroplanes which many GA operators have, when they are sitting on ground, can be certainly put into those connectivity program. That is my suggestion.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Actually, the new policy does envisage that the general aviation is involved in regional connectivity, hence the entire discussion on it. So that is definitely part of the plan of the ministry, to answer your question. I'll take one more question before we close this. Mr. Ajay Kumar, can somebody give him the mic? For the sake of going to the next session after this, we'll close it.
It's not a question, it's a suggestion at this stage, since MOCA representatives are also here. My suggestion at this stage is, while most of us feel that ministry has been fairly positive and understanding in our issues, most of our operators are finding difficulty in the DGCA when we are dealing with DGCA as a technical regulator. If you go through the basic DGCA mission statement itself, there's no way it's listed. GA is one of the priorities. How many aircraft we should have by 2020? What are the steps being taken? What are the challenges they face? And how does DGCA intend to overcome that? the essential role of regulator then shifts to facilitator. That's a very essential core vision which has to be created within DGCA. Number two, what happens to financial health of most operators? Today, wherever corporates are subsidizing their charter arms or their in-house flying, those organizations surviving. Remaining, someone has to monitor their financial health so that we are able to survive the industry. Otherwise, we are at a crisis stage. This is my suggestion this stage. How it can be incorporated, that if you can kindly advise.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ajay. Actually, unfortunately, DGCA reps could not be here today. I think there was an FA audit which was planned, and I think it got postponed at the last minute. But I can assure you that firstly, we agree with you that engagement with the DGCA has been a problem for most operators for now a fair amount of time, for more than a year, I would say. Also due to frequent changes which are happening in the DGCA. I think we would all request the ministry to ensure that